Representative Justin Pearson, welcome to the People's Cabinet.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here with you.
So you represent a part of Memphis, and it's been in the news a lot lately, mostly for Donald Trump, at the national level at least, mostly for Donald Trump's signing an order to send the National Guard to Memphis. You have been out in front on community violence intervention, on ways to reduce violence, on law enforcement in the right ways. Could you tell us what you're hearing on the ground and your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah, look, the desire of this administration to really move us from a democracy into an authoritarian regime run by a wannabe dictator in the service of white supremacy is what's happening all across our country. And Memphis is no exception to the detrimental actions of the current president or those who are his supporters, including our governor, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, who is allowing the National Guard to be weaponized as a pawn and as a ploy of this administration right here in Tennessee. And so what we recognize is that the National Guard is going to be deployed here. We don't know how many. We don't know for how long. The numbers change. The work that they're going to do fluctuates day by day. But resistance is here and is building. And in reading the president's order saying that he had, local official support, that's incorrect. People who live in Memphis, born and raised here, are not supportive of a military occupation. We want poverty eradication. I got expelled fighting to end gun violence. There have been no laws to reduce the amount of gun deaths, an epidemic in our country. I fought with the Poor People's Campaign to reduce the 140 million people who are poor or low wealth in our country. This governor, this administration is hurting people who need SNAP, hurting people who need access to healthcare and resources through the big ugly bill. And so everything's antithetical to the problem they're saying they're wanting to solve.
So can you give us just a little background on what strategies you've either employed or seen employed that actually do help to reduce crime, and whether this administration is doing anything to help in that, or if this is all for show and the actual stuff that actually makes a difference is not being addressed?
All of this is for show, right? It is for show because he's a TV star. And that is what he knows. And he's turned the government into his own reality TV program. But the consequences are very different when you are leading the world's oldest constitutional democracy. And when those desires for attention, those desires to have people fired because you don't like what they say, like has recently happened with Jimmy Kimmel, those types of things is what destroys a democracy. And so the show is quite dangerous. And the consequences are going to be detrimental to our ability to continue to operate in the ways that we have, or at least with the belief that we had that this constitutional democratic republic would be able to survive and endure another Trump administration. And the weaponization that we're seeing now, the National Guard, particularly in Black-led cities or cities with Black majorities, it's a testing ground for the next election. The midterms and also the next presidential election. And so today is a conversation about crime. But in recognition, what I know, what many people recognize is this is a test case for what he will likely do during the next election cycles. If we really want to address crime, and no one wants to be a victim of crime, no one wants to experience the loss of a loved one to gun violence, no one wants any of these negative, horrible things to happen. And the key way that we reduce these things from happening is by addressing the root cause of poverty and economic inopportunity in our communities. If people had wages where they were able to own their own homes, have their own vehicles if they needed them, if they were able to afford the cost of living, which is skyrocketing under this administration due to the tariffs and the increase in inflation, if people were able to survive and thrive in this American economy, then we would not see crime the way that we see it now. If we were as intentional and adamant about eradicating poverty, meeting the social needs of people, whether that be mental health resources, other social services that we know folks need in order to live healthy, safe, good lives, we wouldn't have a conversation about how high crime is in certain places. We'd be celebrating the reductions that we see in places like Baltimore, where Governor Wes Moore and Mayor Brandon Scott have teamed up to put hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into youth. That's the type of work that is needed. But instead of solving the problem is being treated as a political pawn for this administration, for Governor Bill Lee, who's been governor, mind you, for 8 years in Tennessee. He's going into his 8th year and has not done a single thing to address poverty, has not done a single thing to address gun violence. And now all of a sudden, the only solution is militarization, military occupation, further incarceration. That's the solution that we get. And sadly, Dan, the truth is, when people are given these as the options. The only thing we're going to offer you is more military. Only thing we're going to offer you is more police officers. People will take it because we're never being offered. Here's hundreds of millions. Here's billions of dollars in investments. Otherwise,
And when you think about when you talk to your constituents, when you talk to uh, nonprofit leaders in your district, do you have any stories of programs or initiatives that actually did work that we should try to fund and replicate?
yes. Thank you for asking that question. So we were really fortunate for 1 year to have the Boys and Girls Clubs in about 9 of our schools. The funding got cut, and we're down to just having 2 of them. But several of the schools in my district were able to do this, including my parents' alma mater. And it gave kids an opportunity to do something after school other than get in trouble. They were able to build community, learn skills, meet with other students, and build friendships and relationships with people they may not otherwise have gotten to know during the school year. And also for parents, it created a known place of safety for their kids to be. And particularly when you have parents who are having to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to make ends meet, those kids can oftentimes be left sort of to their own devices. And if you create opportunities and pathways for them to use that energy, to use those skills, to use that knowledge in programming and intentional programming for youth, that's done at programs like the Boys and Girls Clubs or programs with organizations like the YMCA, you are able to hone their energy, their skills, their talent, refine it, and keep them safe all at the same time. We know those programs were beneficial because thousands upon thousands of children participated in them, but the funding was cut. And now several of those schools no longer have that programming. And so, what do you expect to happen when you don't invest in opportunities for kids? What do you expect to happen when they don't have safe places to gather? They're not learning arts, they're not learning music, they're not learning skills, they're not learning debate, they're not getting access to educational opportunities or social opportunities that other kids get just because their parents have wealth or have privilege, or the neighborhood that they live in. And those are the places where we see lower crime rates, where kids have more access to opportunities, where parents and adults have more job prospects and the ability to work a job and see increases in what they're getting paid instead of seeing their wages being stagnant and the wealth being transferred to the riches and the CEOs of the companies. And so we know these have worked. We know that the mental health resources of a couple of our organizations, they help over 600 kids get access to a counselor last year. Those are the things that help to reduce our crime rate, which has been going down in Memphis and in Shelby County over the past several months. This administration and Governor Bill Lee's administration haven't invested anything into violence intervention programs, haven't invested anything in the gun violence prevention programs. Instead, they're passing legislation that gives more tax cuts to billionaires, more tax cuts to corporations, and all of those billions that end up in their pockets no longer go to the services that people need, particularly when you think just about the basics of food. If you're eliminating the SNAP program, what do you think hungry people do? It's very hard to learn on an empty stomach. It's very hard to survive on an empty stomach. And so when people are put into survival mode, they do what they have to do to survive, which is oftentimes breaking a window. Some people, I've toured the jail, commit crimes to go to jail, to eat, and be housed. That should worry us, concern us as a community of people who want to see our country function in the right way. But that is actually what's happening. There was a story of a young person who went to prison. They got out immediately. They broke one of the officers' windows of their car just to get back into prison because we don't have the services for them outside of prison, particularly mental health services.
And do you have any indication from either the president or the governor on what this actually means in practice. You know, he signed the executive order or the order. I'm not sure exactly the documentation. And we've seen what happens in DC. We saw what happened in LA. But do you have any kind of details of what they actually plan to do, or is it just kind of a nebulous threat at this point?
They have not released exactly what they plan to do. We've been in touch with folks in DC and other places, LA, that have experienced the military occupation, and is deeply concerning. Some of it seems like it's benign. You know, they're picking up trash, and cutting grass, which, you know, we got a lot of trash and grass they could cut. But the other thing is that you see an increase in the ICE presence when they are occupying DC and occupying LA, and we have a significant amount of community members who are immigrants, and who deserve protection. And so seeing things like that is deeply concerning. And we don't. In our city, just a few years ago, we had Tyree Nichols was murdered by Memphis Police Department. But we don't want to see a horrendous attack against our rights and our Constitution, but also against our people who call Memphis home. And this threat is real, and the consequences can truly be detrimental to the lives of people who help make our Memphis what it is.
You were famously expelled from the House. You were protesting gun control, lack of progress on it. You've been someone who has been out front on the fight has been a question on the Democratic Party writ large. I don't have to tell you this, but nationally, the Democratic Party's approval rating hovers around 30%. One of the top things that respondents of polls say is that Democrats aren't fighting enough. Do you think Democrats are fighting enough on the national level? And what is your advice to DC Democrats on how to improve their approval rating? Should I say?
You know, I mean, the approval rating is because Democrats aren't feeling that we are fighting hard enough, right? And that's a really important point that you mentioned. Isn't even what other people's perception is. Democrats ourselves, and I think the thing is we have to fight back harder. Whatever we think we're doing, we have to say, how do we fight back harder? Look, I've got Democratic colleagues right here in Memphis who are saying things like, we just need to make the best of this situation as possible as this military occupation happens. That is not what we need. We need to stand up against authoritarianism. We need to stand up against this wannabe dictator, realizing that the consequences of the status quo are damning for each and every one of us, including people who are technically on the other side of the aisle. The erosion of democracy is bad for all of us. It only benefits the wealthy, the privileged, the billionaires who are able to fire talk show hosts because they're trying to get something pushed through the FCC. That's who the erosion of democracy benefits. But for everybody else, the 99.99% of us, it doesn't. So we have to, I think his quote's attributed to Mother Jones, right? Like fight like hell for the living, right? And you mourn those who are dead. But in this moment in time, I think we have to realize the playbook that existed, if there ever was one, for how you're engaging with the administration, how you're engaging with the other side, is shredded, burned up, eviscerated in ashes. And so we need to just build our own playbook for how we fight like hell for the living, because people are dying and will die because of the policies of this administration. You take people's access to health care, more people die. You take away people's ability to eat, more people die and or are incarcerated. We are fighting for our right to be alive. Corporations like Elon Musk XAI plant 3 miles away from where I'm sitting from you right now, polluting our community and illegally polluted our community for over a year, increasing the amount of asthma, COPD, literally taking the life and the breath away from people. Like, we are in a fight for our lives. And I believe for all of my colleagues who are Democrats and who are elected, we have to realize there is no accepting this status quo. There is only fighting this status quo with all that we have. And as you see the capitulation of law firms, universities, TV conglomerates, to this administration, it is all the more need now for us to straighten up our backs and to say we are going to hold the line for democracy. If no one else is going to do it, we are going to hold the line for our people. We're going to hold the line for our future. And that is the fight that I think many people want to see us engaging in, and standing up to this administration is how we do that, because it's the epitome of the worst of America.
My last question to you is, there's still a lot of disaffected voters out there who were incredibly disappointed by the November election. There are even Trump voters who now are disgusted by what's going on, and we're just more divided than ever in general. What advice would you give listeners who know those people in their communities who have said, I'm done with politics. I think both parties are not doing what they need to do, and I'm just going to sit this one out. What's your advice to listeners, what they should take to those people?
Yeah, look, first, you can tell people that you get it and you understand. I'm very disappointed about the November election. A lot of us were out there as surrogates, visiting tons of states, meeting thousands of people, trying to express the dangers of another Trump administration. And we're seeing what those dangers are, because he's doing everything he said he was going to do. And it's as horrendous as we believed it would be. And so you can recognize the pain that people feel. And then I think there's also, you just got to tell them the truth. Politics influences every aspect of our lives. Government influences every aspect of our lives, from the potholes being paved by your city council and your mayor, to access to SNAP benefits at the federal level. These things matter. And if you don't engage, all you have to do is think this: who benefits? If you sit it out, who benefits? If you don't participate, if you don't pay attention, who is going to benefit? Who wants that? Who wins when that happens? And that's why we can't. I think about 81-year-old Willie Joe in our community of Boxtown here, who's been fighting a good fight for a long time. And he says, look, I got one more day to fight, so I'm going to fight. We have to have that type of spirit. If we've got one more day to fight, we have to. And sometimes that fight doesn't always look like, taking a substantial risk of being in front of the camera and condemning white supremacy or condemning militarization, occupation. Sometimes it's making sure you're texting your family group chat and saying, hey, I don't think this is right. Sometimes it's just having a conversation with a neighbor and saying, I think the country's headed in the wrong direction. Maybe it is you joining your local Democratic Party and starting to engage in the process, because nothing is a better antidote to apathy than getting more engaged and getting more involved, putting your hands on something to help me improve it and make it better.
Rep. Justin Pearson, thank you for coming on the People's Cabinet. Good luck, and we'll keep talking to you.
Thank you. Let's keep fighting.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the People's Cabinet. If you did, please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and tell us who else you would like to see sworn in. And let us know in the comments what other topics you'd like us to cover. Let's go.